Hey there, 8th graders. Welcome to today's Explainer. I'm literally so excited to have you here. Today, we're going to step into the role of literary detectives. You know, when you read a great story, it's super easy to get swept up in the action, the drama, the dialogue, all that good stuff. But what if I told you there's this invisible force operating behind the scenes of literally every single book you read? It's a force so powerful that it dictates what characters think, how they behave, and what they value most. So today, we're cracking the case on the invisible force of setting and discovering exactly how worlds shape beliefs.
Before we dive into fictional worlds, though, let's ground ourselves in the truth of our real world. Romans chapter 12, verse 2a says, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." This is absolutely crucial, right? It reveals a fundamental truth about human nature. The world we live in constantly applies pressure on us. It tries to squeeze us into its mold, kind of forcing us to conform to its way of thinking. It's this invisible, constant pressure pushing against our minds every single day.
So here's our big detective question for this investigation. If the real world tries to conform us, how does a story's fictional world conform its characters? Think about it. Characters don't just form their beliefs in a total vacuum, no way. They're reacting to the invisible pressures of the exact world they inhabit. If we want to truly understand a character's heart and mind, well, we have to understand the environment that's actively shaping them.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for today's explainer. 1. The invisible force of setting. 2. Why analyzing setting matters. 3. The step-by-step method. 4. Evidence in action. 5. Your turn to investigate. And 6. The godly learner philosophy.
Section 1. The invisible force of setting.
Okay, we need to completely rethink the word setting. For a long time, you might have been taught that the setting is just, the backdrop, like the painted scenery behind the actors on a stage. Actually, scratch that. That's entirely wrong. The setting is the environment where a character lives, and it's made up of specific rules, risks, and resources that shape what they believe is right, possible, and important. I want you to lock in on those 3 R's: rules, risks, and resources. These are the active pressures molding your characters.
Let's look at what actually creates those rules, risks, and resources. We're talking about things like the climate, local culture, laws, family traditions, and even the level of technology. For instance, if a character lives in a freezing, unforgiving tundra, the climate creates a massive risk, right? That risk is going to press on their thoughts, making them value things like thick clothing, shelter, and maybe strict community cooperation literally just to survive. Or, on the flip side, if they live in a highly advanced technological city, well, that resource will completely shape their beliefs about progress and convenience.
Section 2. Why analyzing setting matters.
Now you might be wondering, why do we even need to do this? Why not just read the story for fun and move on? Well, when you just look at what a character does, judging them by their outcomes, it often leads to total misunderstanding and harsh assumptions. You might think, wow, that character is so greedy. But when you study how the setting influences their beliefs, you start understanding their reasons. If you realize that character grew up in a world with absolute scarcity, where people regularly starved, their greed might actually be a deeply ingrained survival mechanism. Seeing the why grows your empathy and your analytical power at the exact same time. It's a real game changer.
And the really crucial point here is that this matters way beyond fiction. Real people's beliefs are influenced by their neighborhoods, the languages they speak, their faiths, their historical backgrounds, and their economic opportunities. When you train your brain to trace a fictional character's belief back to their environment, you're actually training yourself to listen better in the real world. You learn to ask wiser questions of your friends, your family, your neighbors, and you begin to see solutions that actually fit people's real lived realities.
Section 3. The step-by-step method. All right, detectives, it is time to outline our official methodology. How exactly do we investigate a story to uncover these hidden connections? Well, here is your 3-step process. Step 1. Name the factors. Just jot them down in a quick list so you can see the physical, cultural, and historical environment at a glance. Step 2. Ask belief questions tied to those specific factors. And Step 3. Link the factor directly to the belief using specific, undeniable text evidence from the book. Now, let's break down exactly what kind of questions you should be asking in Step 2.
These right here are your master investigative tools. If you're looking at the climate factor, ask yourself, what beliefs about hard work, the passing of time, or survival might this weather produce? If you're looking at culture or laws, ask, what beliefs about family loyalty, personal honor, or human freedom might form under these rules? Or if you're looking at technology or education, ask, what beliefs about scientific progress versus honoring old traditions might grow in this environment? Section 4. Evidence in action.
Let's see how this builds into practical application. We're going to look at 3 different case files to see our method at work. This perfectly illustrates how different worlds create entirely different mindsets. Look at our first case, a Western town in a long drought. The risk is scarcity. Our text evidence shows us that every bucket was counted and no one wasted words or water. So the resulting belief? Survival depends on strict self-control and personal responsibility. Now, jump to an orbital space station where oxygen is rationed. The rules are super strict because the resources are limited. The evidence? Characters constantly check the meter, and air wardens codes hang by every hatch. The belief shaped here is that duty to the group absolutely has to come before personal comfort. Finally, look at an immigrant family in a 1900s port city. The resource is opportunity, but the risk is losing their identity. The mother keeps old songs, the father practices New English, and there are multilingual shop signs everywhere. The setting shapes a belief that you must value both heritage and opportunity, balancing your roots with upward mobility.
Once you've cracked the case, you need to report your findings clearly. I want you to use this exact sentence template in your own writing. Cause and effect. Nice and simple. State the factor, then state the belief. For example, because the village has strict curfews, that's our factor, she believes obedience equals safety, that's our resulting belief. If you can write a sentence like this, you've successfully analyzed the setting.
Section 5. Your turn to investigate.
I've shown you the ropes, I've given you the tools, and now the magnifying glass is entirely in your hands. It's your turn to investigate. Here is your official assignment. I highly recommend you pause the explainer right here and write these down. Number 1, match 3 setting factors to a character belief in your current book. Number 2, find dialogue revealing a setting-shaped belief. Number 3, explain a law or rule influencing a choice. Number 4, and this takes real detective work, identify a moment a character resists the setting's beliefs. And number 5, write a 3-sentence paragraph linking the factor to the belief to an action backed up with evidence.
Section 6. The Godly Learner Philosophy.
Excellent work today. As we wrap up our investigation, I want to slow down for a second to focus on something even more important than literary analysis. At HeroesMart Academy, we believe in deeply intertwining biblical morality with education. Becoming brilliant, analytically sharp, and capable of dissecting complex literature is wonderful, for sure. But knowledge and intelligence alone, they aren't enough. In fact, education without morality can actually hurt. Knowledge should help you make wise, God-honoring choices, rather than simply making you more intellectually capable.
Let's look at what the Apostle Paul writes in Romans chapter 8, verses 6 and 7. For to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace. Just like we analyzed how fictional settings press against a character's mind, the real world is constantly pushing carnally minded pressures onto you. But God calls us to stand firm. Keeping your mind spiritually focused, actively guarding against the invisible rules, risks, and resources of a fallen world is what brings true life and lasting peace.
And that is my absolute greatest hope for you as your teacher. I want you to relentlessly pursue academic excellence. Be the best reader, the sharpest thinker, and the most observant literary detective you can possibly be. But as you build those skills, you must keep your mind centered on God, on truth, on biblical wisdom, and on making righteous choices.
Which brings us to our final thought for today. Remember, your environment, your culture, the media you consume, your friend groups is shaping you every single day. So I leave you with this question. What choices will you make today to keep your mind centered on God's truth? Think on that as you tackle your homework, and I will see you in our next explainer.